online until like Christmas?
Nope.
For 2 weeks.
Bad idea.
Wait, what?
What?
What's happening?
We're not doing that. Nothing's changing.
Good. 'Cause I don't think I wouldn't do anything. I'm honestly hitting a point where it's so
I wouldn't either.
anything. Like I'm hitting a point that
Can I
this
get
is
some lights in the back, please?
really hard to do.
Thank you. Okay, guys, when I left off the other day, we were talking about D-Day, okay, Operation Overlord. Okay, within Operation Overlord is Operation Fortitude, okay? And I don't know if you can see this down here, okay? So you've got the narrow point at Calais and Dover, which normally I would have another thing up here. Let me, here's a pretty good map here, okay? So this is the region known as Pas de Calais, and this is Dover right here, okay? And I finished up with General Patton, who had taken his arm, had the First Army taken away from him, and now he on his hands. So they sent Patton, and they put it in all the newspapers. Patton arrives at Dover. They've got all this fake buildup there, and they're releasing just like fake intelligence to the Germans to really make them feel like this is where the invasion is going to take place at the narrowest point across the channel. Okay. One of the things, the other thing they did that was pretty crafty, they took a RAF soldier or pilot that had been shot down, and he had died. Well, they got the body and they quickly froze it. They changed the clothes of the individual, and then they put the body where the Germans would find it, and they placed fake maps of the invasion on this person's body, which showed how they were going to carry out the invasion here. And, you know, they find this body and they're like, hey, guys, look what we found. All this information about the invasion. It's all fake. Okay, so they went to great lengths because one of the problems is, guys, the reserves here, Rommel here, Rundstedt's in charge really, but Rommel's in here as well. And so wherever the invasion takes place, they will need to send the reserves to those areas, send in the tanks, send in more troops to repel the invasion. You following me? Okay. And so if we can make them think, even though the invasion is taking place here that morning, if they still think maybe this is a fake invasion, the real invasion's here. If we can buy, that's what we need. It's just a few hours to get off the beaches. Then we may have a fighting chance. Okay, so they went into great detail with this Operation Fortitude. Okay, it's really interesting to learn about and read about. And I got to tell you guys, I'm always learning more about World War II, and I read and watch documentaries and stuff. So I mean, so the first time I went to Europe in '99, before we had kids, we planned a 17-day trip. My wife and I, we both had one backpack. And we just went from place to place. And this is one of the places I wanted to visit. So we spent a day and a half here at the beaches of Normandy. Okay, so I've got some pictures I'll show you a little bit later and stuff like that. Okay, but so yeah, this is the operation the way it's planned. Okay, now listen, there's a couple factors here. At Normandy, there's no good ports. You can't like bring your big ships in. Okay, this is all going to be done by landing craft, small boats, okay, where the gate drops down. Now, how many guys have ever seen the movie Saving Private Ryan? Okay, this is tragic. Okay, one person. All right. When this movie came out, now it's a fictional story, but when this movie came out, soldiers that were actually there on D-Day went and watched this film, and they said this was what it was like. Okay, so Steven Spielberg is the director of the movie. Made it as graphic as you could. I mean, it's a real feel to it. So the first 30 minutes of Saving Private Ryan are some of the bloodiest film you'll ever see. You know what I mean? But it really reinforces what our guys were up against, okay? This is going to be American troops, Canadian troops, Scottish troops, and British troops, Okay, there'll be 5 beaches, code name. Okay, I've got a slide on that. I'll talk about that too. Just not have that in here. Thought I had a slide. I guess not. Okay. This one doesn't. Okay. You've got Utah, Omaha, 2 American Indian names, yes? Okay. You've got Gold, Juneau, and Sword. Okay. The 2 American beaches are going to be Utah and Omaha. This will be British and Canadian over here. Okay. These five beaches, code name. All right. So you have to go at low tide. Because what the Germans have done, oh, I've got the slide. I've got another presentation here, sorry. Just give me a second. I've got a whole thing on this, sorry. I bet it's in here. No? Okay. No? Okay. Here we go. This is what. Got the Atlantic Wall. Where's the frickin' Atlantic Wall presentation? Yeah. Okay, this is good stuff here. Okay. So the Germans have had 4 years to prepare for this day. Okay? All along the French coast. They've had 4 years to prep for it. So at high tide, you see this. Okay, you've got what are called log ramps that have mines on them. So if your boat hits those, it's going to go boom. Okay, you've got these Belgian gates out here, which if you've got these flat bottom landing craft, okay, if they get stuck in these gates, the soldiers are going to have to go overboard and try and swim to shore with all this stuff on their backs. Okay, you've got log posts that are mined, and then you've got these hedgehogs, okay, which you'll see in the movie if you watch the movie, okay? Then you've got a cliff and a seawall, and then another cliff here where the Germans are up here, and they're going to be able to fire down on the beach. If you go in at high tide, your boats are going to hit these things. You got to go in at low tide. Now, there's only a couple days out of the month that you can do this, so the Germans know that, so they're on high alert during low tide. Okay, so if you go in at low tide, you're here. You're going to miss these obstacles. They're going to be on the beach, but you've got 300 or 400 more yards that you got to cross while the Germans are shooting at you. Machine guns and artillery raining down on you for about 400 yards. These are some of the ships coming across through the barrage balloons. Okay. So this is a good picture. You can see the landing craft here. I've got some more of that in a hedgehog. This is taken on D-Day. And then the Germans also have these large guns that can fire onto the beaches or down the beaches. Okay. These gun encampments we've got to take out. Now we're going to try and take them out with the Navy. Okay. Now one of the problems, like I said, there's no real good ports on the beaches of Normandy. So they're going to build their own. Okay, this is at a place called Arromanches, which is between Omaha and Gold. Okay, beaches. And so what they did here, these huge concrete blocks. Any of you guys water ski? Okay, when you go water skiing, you want water that's glassy, right? Glassy water, smooth. Okay, go early in the morning or in the evening, right? And so they brought these over to kind of stop the current. They would drop these in. They actually sunk some ships in here as well to stop the current, and then they built floating docks. So this is all blocking the current, and so you bring your big ships in here up next to the pontoon dock and unload your tanks and other supplies. So they built their own harbor in one day. Okay, this is amazing. If you go there today, I've got a picture. You can still see this stuff out in the channel. You go there today, okay? At Arromanches. And this is where they have the really good D-Day museum at Arromanches that we went to, okay? That I've got some pictures of in here, okay? Okay, so here's your 5 beaches. Good picture here. Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juneau, and Sword. Okay, now, at Utah, American troops are actually going to land off course by about a mile. Okay, and Franklin Roosevelt's son is one of the captains leading troops at Utah. The fact that they were about a mile off course was a good thing. Where they landed, there was less resistance. Okay, now there's also this thing here called Pointe du Hoc, which is down the beach some from Omaha. It's in between Utah and Omaha. Pointe du Hoc is where they have high cliffs, and there's a big gun that sits right here that they can fire down on all these other beaches. So at these high cliffs, the U.S. Army Rangers are going to be tasked with climbing these cliffs while the Germans are firing down on them at Pointe du Hoc. I got a slide on that. Okay, so you know what I'm talking about there. At Omaha, guys, this is where things go wrong. The German defenses at Omaha are really bad. Okay. Guys, the life expectancy of an American GI on Omaha Beach in the first wave, life expectancy was 8 seconds. Okay, as soon as those Higgins boats, as we'll call them, dropped their gate, Germans were firing into these boats. So as soon as this gate dropped down and you're getting out of this boat, machine gun fire is coming in. Artillery's exploding around you. So a lot of guys drowned, going over the side, okay? Some of the guys made it. The first wave was hammered at at Omaha Beach. Okay, and that's what this movie starts with, okay? Saving Private Ryan. These Higgins boats, this was the nickname they gave these. So as I've talked to you guys before, the National World War II Museum is in the Nolans, okay? When you build flat bottom boats, biggest manufacturer of these boats was in Louisiana because of the swamps down there. They build these flat bottom boats. And so when they needed these for World War II, they got this guy Higgins that built these boats to build them for the Army. Okay? And so they called them Higgins boats. So that's where they did the National D-Day Museum originally, was there. And they went to build the museum and they were looking all over. And guys, we built tens of thousands of these. They're looking all over the world for one of these to put in the museum and they can't find them. So they took the original blueprints and built one for the museum. And they're pretty big. I mean, you go in there and you see this, they're big. Okay? So this is going to have, like 30 guys in it. All right? So these didn't come all the way across the channel. They brought the big ships halfway, a little over halfway over the channel, and then they disembarked onto these. They dropped them off and then went back to get more troops and back, okay? And they had floating tanks, okay, that all kinds of different technology that they tried. A lot of the tanks didn't make it. They sunk. They built like floaties around the tanks. I mean, I watched a video on this recently. I was like, because like I said, always learning more stuff about it. Okay, so these Higgins boats, okay, and so this is what our guys are up against, all right? And so let me show you. I'm going to go to here. Kids. No. Yeah. Okay. All right. So this is a picture at Omaha. Okay, this is some of the beaches that we went up. This is probably at high tide. But these are this is the American Cemetery in France that I went and visited. I'll show you some pictures here in a second. I didn't take this picture, but I just kind of want to give you an overview. How do I go to my next picture?
See all photos.
No. I don't need all that. Why don't it just let me? There we go. Okay. So right here, guys, this is inside one of the German bunkers. Oops. at Pont du Hoc. Okay, so the cliffs are right on the other side of this, going down. Okay, I got in there and took a picture. This is also, you can see these cliffs. This is near Pont du Hoc. This is me standing in a bomb crater. So this is June of 1999. Okay, this happened in June of 1944. Okay, so what, 55 years later? Okay, still got bomb craters up there. There's my wife. This is one of the big guns at Pont du Hoc, the big bunker for the gun. And then this is Pont du Hoc. So the Army Rangers actually scaled on the other side of this, and there's a monument there that recognizes the sacrifice of the Army Rangers there. Reagan gave a speech there on, I think it was the 50th or 40th anniversary of D-Day. One of the best speeches you'll ever hear. He had a lot of the veterans that survived that day. So this is from the cemetery, okay? The other class I showed the cemetery that I was in Italy. Okay, I think you guys weren't here that day. Guys, this is sobering to go here and see all the Americans that died on French soil. The movie Saving Private Ryan opens at this cemetery and ends at this cemetery. It's kind of a guy flashbacks to what happened in his life. So this is inside the museum at Aromanches. And this is at Aromanches. So remember I was talking about the floating harbor, the stuff they put out there. That's me in my high tops. I brought one pair of shoes. This is at the cemetery. It's the memorial there. And so my wife and I, we went to England first and then went up to Scotland and then took a ferry across the channel. So this is going across the channel, basically the same route that the troops took that morning on the boats. Took about 4 hours to get across the channel at that depth of how long that trip is. Okay, styling right there, dude. There's the ferry. Okay, now this is actually at Omaha Beach. Okay, so I walked out as far as I could, without getting my one pair of high tops wet. Okay, and then took a picture facing back in. Okay, so this is what the Germans were up here. Okay, and so as we're coming, they've got to get up that beach. Okay, now that's pretty low tide. I don't know if it's that as far as it goes out or not, but that was pretty interesting. And that's just kind of taking a view down towards Pont du Hoc that way. This is a plaque inside the bunker at Pont du Hoc that memorializes the Army Rangers that scaled the cliffs. This is kind of a good story. This is in the museum. This is the British had these. They're called Rupert. Okay, this thing stands about 4 feet tall, about Cindy Hong size. Okay, and basically on the night of the attack, in the early morning hours of the attack, they dropped these behind German lines. Okay, to distract them. So when this hits the ground, the impact of it hitting the ground, one of these arms will drop, and in this pack right here are fireworks, firecrackers. So it sounds like gunfire. So these hit the ground, you hear pop, 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 and they dropped a bunch of these behind them just to throw them off. Okay. In this picture, we had this blown up, have it hanging in the basement. That's kind of a cool picture. Okay. And I brought some sand back and stuff like that from Omaha Beach. Some postcards and stuff. Okay. So this is some good pictures of them climbing the cliffs. They brought these ladders with them. And then any of you guys fish? Yeah. I don't know if you know what a treble hook is. It's, most fishing hooks just one hook. But they have treble hooks, which are 3. It's like a claw, okay? But they made them like this big, okay? And then they had an air cannon, and they fired them up into the barbed wire. And then had a rope, and they tightened them down, and they scaled the cliffs on these ropes, okay? That's what these guys are doing. And the Germans are firing at them. They're shooting at them. Okay, it's amazing. They get to the top. That big gun they were worried about. I mean, the whole fortress fort had been built. There was no gun in it. So they scaled those cliffs for no reason. That's the importance of having good intelligence. You know what I mean? So those guys really did this and didn't have to. Okay. So June 6th through 8th, 1940, Rutter's Rangers suffered 70% casualty rate going up those cliffs. Okay, let me go back to this slide that has information on it. Okay, so you got Operation Fortitude. Okay, and then on June 5th at 9:30 p.m., they had to decide whether they were going to go or not. Now, Eisenhower's in a room with Monty and other generals, Omar Bradley, others. The weather is bad. That night, there's rain, there's storms over the English Channel. And they're worried about getting all these men on the boat, whether they can pull this off with the weather being that bad. So they're all relying on a meteorologist named Colonel Stack. And they're like, hey, what do you think's going to happen with this weather? And he says, I think there's going to be a window where the weather will calm down. And so at 9:30 that night, they made the order to go. All right. So one of the first things to happen, guys, is they're going to start sending paratroopers in. Okay. To secure key bridges. This is under the cover of darkness. So this is before we hit the beaches. So these paratroopers, and they're going to use what are called gliders. You guys know what a glider is? It's a plane you pull that doesn't have an engine. You pull it, you get it up in the air, and it just glides. Okay, but these have a couple dozen troops on them. At night. Supposed to land in France at night. Okay, now the French resistance is supposed to be lighting landing zones for the paratroopers and for the gliders. Now, the British were the ones doing the gliders. The Americans were the paratroopers, okay? Some of the crew survived landing these gliders in France at night. Okay? There's a lot of obstacles, man. You know what I'm saying? Unless you land in an open field, you're going to hit something when you land, okay? And that is if you can come in smooth. It's crazy. Now, the 101st Airborne and the 82nd Airborne, they're supposed to be getting these, these drops, but the weather's bad, and the Germans hear the planes, and they're firing anti-aircraft fire at the planes. It's freaking chaos. Now, there's a movie that came out not too long ago called Overlord, but it's more of a zombie movie. You guys see that? Oh, come on, people. So the first, 10 minutes of this movie, it shows the paratroopers. But when they land, it becomes a zombie thing. Like the Germans are experimenting on people and they turn them into super soldiers. Okay, that's just like a crazy thing, right? These freakish soldiers. But the beginning shows our paratroopers getting shot at and just the chaos of it. So they did not land where they were supposed to, the paratroopers. But the goal is to secure key bridges. See, the Germans have lined all the bridges with explosives. So if they find out we're landing, they're going to blow the bridges so we can't get off the beaches. You understand? We want to control these because if we really struggle getting off the beaches, we can blow the bridges so the Germans can't get the reinforcements in and send us into the sea. So we don't have another Dunkirk. Okay? So that is key. So the 101st, 82nd Airborne and these British gliders come in, and that somehow they pull off. They will secure these bridges and take them from the Germans. Okay, it's nuts. Let me show you. Okay, so there's bridges just in here. These little towns and so forth with these bridges. They come in under the cover of darkness. Now, one of the places they did this, that they were off, they didn't land where they're supposed to. Some of our soldiers fell right into this small town called San Miguelis. Okay, and there was a fire at the casino in San Miguelis. This is in the middle of the night. It's like 2 o'clock in the morning. Okay, and everybody's up because they're trying to put out this fire, including German soldiers are out there. And all of a sudden, paratroopers start falling out of the sky. And the Germans are shooting at them as they're falling. Okay, there's this one soldier that falls and hits the church, lands on the roof of the church, slides down. His paratroop gets caught on the steeple, his parachute, and he's hanging over the edge of the building, suspended like 30 feet in the air. Germans shot at him. It went right through his foot, and he played dead for like the next 8 hours until the troops finally showed up. Okay. So many stories. Now, this movie here is called The Longest Day. All right, and it's probably the best D-Day movie there is. Okay, it's got John Wayne in it. Okay, Peter Fonda, not Peter, Henry Fonda, and Robert Mitchum. Okay, this movie it's a long movie. It's the longest movie too. Okay, it gives you the German perspective, the French resistance perspective, the British perspective, and the American perspective all in one movie. There's not really a plot to this movie. It just kind of shows what happens on D-Day, the longest day. Okay, great movie. Subtitles with the German and stuff. Okay, and the French. So we have 3 million people on the island of Britain ready for this invasion. 3 million soldiers from U.S., Britain, India, New Zealand, Australia, Canada, South Africa, from all over the world. Free French, free Poles, free Czechs, all on this island. 3 million troops. All the supplies, the tanks, the planes, everything they need. If we can get off these beaches, if we can establish a beachhead, we can liberate Europe. If this doesn't work, we got to go back to the drawing board. We're going to lose a lot of men. So, we got 176,000 men in the first few waves, 4,000 supporting craft, 600 warships, 11,000 planes. Now, the air cover is not going to do you any good once the landings start, because you don't know where there's American troops and German troops mixed. You can't start dropping bombs in there. You can have friendly fire. You're going to be killing a lot of your own people. Okay, so the air superiority is not going to really help. Okay. So at 5:30, the Navy just opens up on the Atlantic Wall for an hour straight, just trying to destroy as many Germans as they could. Well, guys, they're all dug in. You know what I mean? They've got trenches, they've got fortresses, bunkers, so that this didn't do a lot of damage. So 6:30, the first troops landed. Okay. At Gold, Juno, and Sword, things went pretty good. At Utah, things went well. At Omaha, they were bogged down. Okay, and that's in the middle. Okay, so that trouble occurred. Many were killed. But by about noon, they had broken through the seawall and started, killing the Germans at the top of the cliffs. Okay. Now that morning, the German generals were radioing back, saying, the invasion is on. One guy said, there's 5,000 ships in the channel. Now, Hitler has not been sleeping well by June of 1944. In fact, Hitler is taking sleeping pills because the Russians on the Eastern Front are kicking the crap out of the Germans. Italy, we're winning. We just took Rome the day before. Okay. So from the coast, they're saying, here's the invasion. Hitler's back in Germany. All right. They call and say, hey, this invasion's underway at Normandy. And everybody thought it was going to be at Calais. General Jodl, who is Hitler's aide, his aide-de-camp, his top general was aide, refuses to wake Hitler up because Hitler's been in a bad mood and he's not sleeping, but he's sleeping now. I'm going to let him sleep. Well, eventually, so many more reports came through that they released the reserves. But that delay until after noon, after 12 o'clock that morning, they didn't release the reserves until then. So by then, we had established our beachhead. The port at Arromanches was just about functioning, and we were on our way. Okay, it was a success. And so D+7, okay, within a week, D+7, 326,000 men had landed, 50,000 vehicles, and 100,000 tons of supplies. Now, the fight here is not over. I mean, the Germans are not just going to give up. Okay, so there's going to be a lot of fighting ahead of us. But the fact that we established the beachhead, we do have air superiority over the channel, so we can resupply from across the channel and continue to bring tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of men across the channel. Okay? How many? 10 minutes. Okay. So, any questions on this D-Day? I don't know if I'm sure I left some stuff out, but guys, this is literally a day that changes the course of human history. You know what I mean? This really changes everything. All right, and huge sacrifice on the part of the Americans, the British, the Canadians. Okay. When I first started to become a teacher, I was a para out at Mays. I think I told that story in one of my classes, but I was in school to become a teacher. This is back in 96. And when I was out at Mays, one of our teachers had a veteran come in and talk to the students. Okay. And I've had veterans in here before as well. None of that going on this year, but this guy came in and he was at Omaha Beach in the first wave and survived. Okay. And so you're talking about one of very few men. And to live that long and then be able to tell the story, And it was, 24 years ago. And I still remember the story, him telling it like it was yesterday. I mean, when they were going up the cliff, just off the beach, once they got through the seawall and started going up the cliff, they're laying in sand. And I mean, the Germans are, sending artillery and machine gun fire. And he said he was next to his best friend. And they were like waiting for orders. They're sitting there talking. And then he looked and turned that way, heard something and turned around. And his buddy had been hit. He said, got hit by a shell and basically it opened him up. And his guts were laying out on the ground right in front of him. And he said he'd never forget that. I haven't forgotten it either. I wasn't there, but it just like, it was random. I mean, if you survived, a lot of the survivors of war have guilt, that they survived and the ones they were with didn't survive. Those are the real heroes, the ones that, paid the ultimate sacrifice. That's what they'll tell you, But guys, this was, and it has a lot of scholarship on it, a lot of movies and stuff on it, because it is definitely a day that changed human history. So, and that's why I wanted to go there when I went to France. Okay, was to check that place out. Okay, so once we establish the beachhead here, okay, we've got to break out. Okay, and there's a term that our veterans use for this, and it's called going out across the hedgerows. Okay, when you guys were kids, there was a movie that came out that said "Over the Hedge." Remember that cartoon movie? Okay. Well, if you remember in the movie, they're big, right? These tall hedges. Okay. And in Kansas, when after the Depression, we planted trees, right, to separate property lines and block the wind out here in Kansas. Okay. But in France, if you look at the countryside, It's full of hedges. All right. You never know what's on the other side of one of these hedges. Could be 6 feet tall, 8 feet tall, thick. You can't see, but you can hear on the other side of it. Okay. So when our paratroopers landed that night into this stuff, they gave them a little children's toy. It's what they call a thumb depressor, or they refer to it as a cricket. So you put it, yeah, I don't know if you've ever seen one of these. You push it down, it goes click, and then it pops back up, click. So it goes click, click, click. You do?
I used it for my NHD project last year as one of my props.
And you have one.
Yeah.
You should do show and tell. Bring it in if you remember. Okay. But so you can do one click, and then if somebody hears you on the other, they hear that, they respond with 2 clicks. 1 click, respond by 2 clicks. Okay. And so you know that's an Allied soldier on the other side of the hedge. Now, in the movie The Longest Day, and I don't know if this, but one of the weapons that the Germans would use was a bolt-action rifle. So after you fire the weapon, you pull the thing, it goes click, click, and then you push it back in, click, click, to load the bullet. It's a bolt-action rifle. Okay, well, 1 click, 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 is answered by 2 clicks. Click, 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 click. And so in the movie, the soldier thought he heard 2 clicks from a cricket, and it was a gun, and he came around the side of the bush, and he got shot by a German soldier. I don't know if that actually happened in real life, or they just did that for the movie. Did you know that story? Did you know about the 1 click, 2 clicks?
I did. The person I did it over was in a lot of the like Asian and Pacific.
Oh, okay. They used them over there too?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So this is a Sherman tank. All right. And this Sherman tank right here has teeth on it. Okay. They used those hedgehogs that were on the beaches and welded them from front of the tanks to cut through the hedgerows with these things. And so these how tanks are used. Okay, with the infantry following alongside as protection. Okay, they're protected, not the tank. And then here's another picture of one of these Shermans with the teeth on the front going. It's got all the brush on it and stuff. All right, so we got a few minutes. Let's just keep rolling. I don't have time to show you 30 minutes of Saving Private Ryan. But I think it's on Netflix.
I have the DVDs.
Yeah, I have the DVD. You could actually YouTube a few minutes of it. Yeah, I'm sure they have opening scene. Okay, of Saving Private Ryan. And guys, you just need to see the movie, the whole movie, because not only is it a good war movie, it's just a good movie. Okay, incredible. Okay. The Allies on the move. So the Battle of Normandy lasted, so it's June 6th. So this is D plus about 5-6 weeks. Okay. Allies by July 24th had landed more than 1 million men and controlled 1,500 square miles. Now the Germans are starting to think they're in trouble, and they are. Okay. On July 25th, General Patton's back in action. He got an army back. Now they didn't give him the first army back. They gave him the 3rd army. Okay. So Old Blood and Guts, which was his nickname, is back out on the move. He's going after the Germans. Within a month of that, Paris is liberated. In one of the most famous photographs of World War II, you can see American troops marching down the Champs-Élysées through the Arc de Triomphe. It took me about a decade to learn how to say those words. And when my wife and I left Normandy, we went to Paris, had dinner on the Champs-Élysées, saw the Arc de Triomphe, took a picture of Eiffel Tower from a distance, and then got the hell out of Paris. The French are not very kind people. They're rude. They're snooty. They're stuck up. They look down on us Americans as simple people. And they're right. We are simple people. But we save their ass. Okay? And I tell you what, when we liberated Paris, now I'm going to say that it's a little bit risque, okay? But there's a guy named Ernie Pyle who's a wartime correspondent, okay? And Ernie Pyle was embedded with our troops for a lot of the war, okay? And so he wrote a lot about the war. And in his book, when he described the liberation of Paris, guys, it was a celebration. The wine was flowing, okay? And most of the French were happy that we were there. Now, this is kind of nasty. Well, it's just war, okay? So there were a lot of French collaborators. You know what I mean? People that like worked with the Germans and enforced German restrictions on the people. You follow me? When we liberated Paris, those collaborators, some of them were executed right on the street. A lot of them were sent to jail. Some of them were put on trial. Okay. But this is what Ernie Pyle said about liberating Paris. He said, if you were an American GI in Paris when we liberated it and you didn't get laid, there was something wrong with you. Now, that's an exaggeration, I'm sure. Okay. But they were having a good time. Just, you know what I mean? All right. It was a party, and the French ladies were happy to see us. Okay, so that's fine. All right, so within 6 weeks of liberating Paris, all of France, most of France is emptied of German troops. Okay, guys, this is a long story short. Okay, most of our guys that hit the beaches of Normandy did so in the days after the invasion, right? Most of them walked across France. We didn't have enough trucks to like drive everybody across France. Most of them were on foot. Walking across France. Now the guys that were at the front fighting, obviously they were fighting and walking across France. Okay. But this was big. The Germans will lose about 500,000 men in France. Okay. And massive amounts of military machinery. Okay. And so now will come the time where Hitler is being hit from the Eastern Front as the Russians approach Europe, pushing them back, and then the Americans and British pushing them back across France. And so Hitler's got a two-front war on both sides of his country, and he's in deep doo-doo. Okay? That will be saved, the rest of that story for tomorrow. Okay? Thanks for coming, guys. Ethan, I got a couple books for you.
Okay, great.
Yep.